It was a perfect storm in terms of the fire breaking out at night on a weekend.
I've never seen anything like this on TV. You hardly see it in the movies, Hiroshima maybe, you know what I mean?
It's pretty sad. The fire burned the building, the wine's gone.
On Sunday the 8th of October, Officer Jan Sears of California's Highway Patrol Unit was on a typical shift, monitoring the radio and scanning the streets from above for any signs of trouble. But that night, something felt different.
One of the most unusual things about that evening was the wind. When we left the airport, there was about a 20 to 25 knot wind straight out of the north down the runway. So I knew that it was going to be one of those kind of nights where it would be a tiny bit bumpy if we were lower, so I chose to fly at a higher altitude. And I looked up to the north of the city of Napa, where the mountains up there are very dark at night. And I just saw what to me looked like a faint flicker of light. Maybe somebody having a party. Just, it looked unusual to me. So we started to fly that way. As we got about halfway there, I realized the flicker was getting larger, and that what I was actually seeing was the beginnings of what's come to know as the Atlas Peak fire. We initially arrived overhead. It was, I would guess, somewhere about 20 acres, so less than half a mile in breadth. To by the time the evening finished out, it was covering 3 to 4 miles easily. We were estimating the rate of spread at 100 meters per minute. The growth rate was more rapid than any fire that I'd ever seen. Once we arrived overhead, that's when I realized this was not going to be a fire that they were going to extinguish right away, but it was already starting to run homes and property over. And I know that 10 o'clock at night, most people are getting ready for bed, and that we've got a much bigger situation on our hands.
High winds, acres of dry land and rapidly growing fires late on a Sunday night presented a huge challenge to authorities.
This was, I would think, for the fire service and public safety officials that were dealing with it at the time, about as challenging a situation to react to quickly as you can possibly design. Things were dry. We'd had a lot of rain last winter, so there was a lot of fine fuel. And when you have a lot of grasses that have dried out, as we're this late in the fire season, California goes brown.
After assessing the fire, Officer Sears quickly alerted his colleagues of the need for extra help.
On our way into the fire, as soon as we started coming over the city of Napa, we decided to turn on the siren and start giving evacuation orders over the loudspeaker in the helicopter. We're thinking that people may already be asleep, so we looked specifically for houses, and then we would put the night sun or the searchlight right into the windows of those houses, trying to get anybody's attention any way that we could.
The highway patrol teams, along with local fire crews and other first responders, worked through the night to help evacuate homes and desperately stop the spread of flames. In just 12 hours, the fires had torched 20,000 acres of land. This is Coffey Park in Santa Rosa, one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in the area. It is ground zero for California's wildfire destruction. When the flames arrived in the early hours of the morning on Monday the 10th of October, residents had just minutes to escape. The fire did not discriminate. More than 1,500 homes were destroyed. There's little sign that anything left behind managed to survive. The scale of the devastation here is just astonishing. This entire community has been almost entirely flattened. There's just a few trees and chimney stacks left standing. There is evidence that this was once where people lived. You can see a few burnt out cars and a few burnt out washing machines as well. But you really get a sense that when people left their homes here, they didn't have any time to pick up their personal belongings or their valuables. They just had to get out as soon as possible because the fire was so ferocious and so intense. A few days after we first visited and when inspectors deemed the area safe, the National Guard and police began allowing residents to formally return. But even for the people who lived in this neighbourhood, it is no longer recognisable. The fire was so intense that the street signs are burned out and the names are written on the ground instead. Residents are seeing the damage for themselves for the first time and are salvaging what they can.
Driving through and seeing the whole neighborhood, I just cried. It was just, it's because you know how many family members and friends and neighbors are hurt. We found my high school ring, which is nice. I'm more hoping that my wife finds her family jewelry, her dad's wedding ring. We're going to have a few things. We knew we wouldn't have anything.
And the whole neighborhood is
gone. You're literally looking at probably at least 2,000 homes. You're looking at people that have lived here for nearly 30 years. That's a lifetime.
Jim Scally lived in Coffey Park for 28 years. He says he's determined to rebuild.
I can see people enjoying themselves in my backyard right now, just cherishing everything. And we got to create more memories. It's a way to give me hope to say, hey, we've got a future. I mean, and other people have it a lot tougher than us. There's a lot of people that died.
People are returning home here for the first time to see what's left of their homes. And they're just trying to salvage whatever they can, really, whether that be small pieces of jewellery or other family heirlooms, but there's very little left at all. It will take some time, I think, before the families here truly understand and can comprehend the impact that these wildfires have had on their lives.
I found it right next to her bed where she said it was. I can't believe this. It just means that we just have a little something. You know what I mean? I mean, we could always get another ring, but this is something that is personal.
A few blocks away, we meet Forrest Badaracco. He's back at the site of his home where he escaped with his family on the night of the fire.
It was just smoking, no sirens, no alarms. It was like a blizzard of wind that you never see here. Trees and branches were coming down. You couldn't drive in a straight line, and pretty soon there's smoke around us, and pretty soon there's a car on fire, a house on fire. We were like in the fire. Like, I've never seen anything like this on TV. You hardly see it in the movies, Hiroshima maybe, you know what I mean? Like, but Coffey Park, this is the nicest middle-class place in Santa Rosa. Every street was like family. Every street was personal and intimate. You know, like everybody knew everybody on their street. Like everybody here knew everybody, you know, and it goes with parties and everything. And I think that's why everybody got out, because everybody on their street helped everybody save each other. You know what I mean? Nobody just left people.
Okay, watch. I'm going to take a picture of David. Watch this.
Joanne Bartlett's sister and brother-in-law are here to help search through the rubble. Some of her mother's old Danish plates have survived, something to smile about at last.
That's my sister and brother-in-law.
For Joanne and her husband Barney, returning here brings back their own memories of the terrifying night almost 2 weeks earlier, when the smell of smoke and the sight of flames forced them to flee their home.
I go back to the bedroom and I'm yelling at him and he's in a dead sleep. He finally got up. And then he looked outside, he goes, oh, he says, I think we got to get out of here. And we have no idea what we threw into the suitcase. We got our medicine. I got my cat and threw her in the car. He opened the garage door in case we couldn't get out, and I said, I would. It was frightening to get down to that neighborhood and not be able to get out. And the fire is coming. And then when we finally got around the corner, I looked back and the in-house was on fire. And at that moment, we weren't moving, and I said, I looked at my friend Shauna and I said, I think we're gonna die. It's gonna be a long process for everybody. And like I said, we have sympathy for them too. It's just not us in the boat. But there are days that I think of only what I've lost in my house. And I guess that's okay. Right, honey?
We will survive.
Yeah. I got that in my team. Okay.
We got here Sunday night. We got the call at midnight. We were here at 2 a.m. We were one of, I think, maybe 7 resources here. They were spread so thin, and we don't really see the end in sight with these winds that they keep getting and the weather. It's especially close to home because I live in Santa Rosa, and a lot of us do. We have a lot of community members that are on our crew with us. So yeah, bigger than anything I've seen. Was hoping to never have to see anything like this.
Mandatory evacuations there too. That all happened between 4 and 5 a.m. this morning, and as you can imagine, the response...
There's houses, there's tracks, and everything's burned, and one house will be saved. It just doesn't burn. Just doesn't get the flame. So it's just hit and miss. It's just the luck of the draw. Fire doesn't discriminate, rich, poor.
In total, 21 wildfires burned through almost 250,000 acres. 100,000 people were evacuated. Around 9,000 structures were destroyed, and 43 people lost their lives.
These fires are collectively the worst, certainly in terms of loss of life. It was a perfect storm in terms of the fire breaking out at night on a weekend. You had a number of fires start in a relatively short period of time. That meant that your initial response to the fire was going to be problematic.
The scale of the wildfires meant fire crews were brought in from across the state of California, other parts of the US, and even from Australia. At the peak of the fires, 11,000 firefighters battled the flames. And these men, in their distinctive orange fire-resistant suits, form a unique part of that team. In these tents behind me are no ordinary firefighters. They're prisoners, around 450 of them. Every day, around 300 of them go out and fight the fires and help with the clear-up operation. And they'll stay here until the last fires are out. As they emerge from their 24-man tents, the men prepare for 24-hour long shifts. They're deemed to be a low security risk and have all volunteered for the program.
I like it because you're out, you're not behind a wall, and you get to give back to the community, you get to help families, and so that's a lot of the reason why I do it. We make $1 an hour when we're out here on the fires. I'm in prison, so I guess I take what I can get. So I guess it's fair. I guess it's fair.
When it seems safest, I don't feel the danger, but the dangers are there. Most of the times, most of the fires we've been on, there doesn't seem to be a lot of threats. Threats being like trees falling on you or intense fire activity. For the most part, things are pretty mellow. When things get really intense, they don't have us in there.
While many prisoners prefer the camps to life behind bars, some inmates think the work amounts to slave labor.
Yes, I do feel that way, and it is. Yeah, there's no mistaking it. It is what it is. On the positive side, it helps people that have no work experience. It gives them an opportunity to experience what it is to work. On the negative side, this is not so apparent, but it sends a message that your work is not worth much.
This is a terrible fire. It's destroyed a lot of homes, a lot of structures, and normally we're on the mountainside. They've brought us to the homes to fight fire next to homes because there's homes burning down, and that's the immediate threat. My plan is to continue this. I think I'm good at it. I enjoy it, and it gives back to the community that I took so much from. It's a really rewarding feeling.
And as the battle against the flames went on, what caused them remained a mystery. But experts say in almost all cases, fire investigators can eventually determine where and why a fire started.
This part of California, fires are almost always of human origin. And there are a variety of ways that humans start fires. You can have our infrastructure can create a risk. So you have power lines, which if a tree blows into a power line or a power line goes down, that could start a fire. Humans can be careless. They can accidentally cause a fire to start.
Many of the 100,000 people evacuated from the fires end up here at one of the federal emergency response centres. Evacuees come here for information and for help. A small army of volunteers and disaster response organisations work with state and government officials to hand out essential supplies and direct evacuated and homeless residents.
FEMA is here, they're on site.
We're going to be here as long as the need exists, and you'll probably see centers like this spring up throughout the affected areas, and it's to take the services to closer proximity to where the people are. So, the greatest need is understanding. You know, a lot of people here have been through a catastrophic event that no one's ever encountered before. So they're learning what they need, and we have some experience at being able to anticipate what those needs are. That's why we're all here and bringing these services under one roof to hopefully cut through some of the barriers that people are going to find on this road to recovery.
Stacey McGill and her husband are still living hour by hour, day by day. Their home in Santa Rosa is gone, so they're living with Stacey's sister, but their long-term future is unclear.
We're looking at a variety of different options. There was a huge housing shortage in Sonoma County before the fire hit, so it's really tough for people to find housing, to find options. They gave us a list of property management companies, but those houses were already gone because there's so many people looking, so we don't know.
With so many hotels and shelters full, some people, like the Gonzalez family, end up at places like this, a campsite on the coast of Northern California.
Well, I got the notification on my phone, and then after that there was like people going around, also police and everything saying to evacuate. So we ended up going to Napa, but after sleeping there for like 2 days, it was also really smoky. So we just ended up coming over here because a lot of family members were telling us to just stay over here. My boyfriend was getting a lot of migraines because of the smoke, and also like I would be getting headaches and everything. So we just decided to come over here because it was like fresh air.
The conditions are far from ideal. Temperatures at night can drop to close to freezing.
Some of my boyfriend's aunts were saying how like usually they come camping and it's like fun, you know, when it's like planned, but this time it's like not, so they are kind of stressing about this whole situation.
And while families wait for the fires to die down, they begin to think about the future. Ingrid's boyfriend works in the wine industry, the heart of the economy in this region. Nobody knows the answers to questions about jobs and finances.
Some people are thinking about it, you know, what's gonna happen, maybe. They've helped us a lot here also with like food and everything, and like they're not letting us pay for like the campsites, which was really nice, or the showers, but other than that, yeah, like maybe stressing about bills, thinking about it.
Even when the fires have been put out, authorities face the difficult task of making sure an area is safe to return to. That means checking for dangerous chemicals, that structures are safe, and that roads have been cleared. But the evidence of the fire's destructive path will remain for months. It's been several days now since the fire was in this area, and you can start to see the full extent of the damage. Entire acres of this national park completely burnt to the ground. And even though it is days later, the smell of burning and of the ash is still thick in the air. In the months ahead, there will be insurance claims, investigations, clean-up operations and rebuilding. But for now, the people returning to Coffey Park are just grateful to be alive.
debris removal will take several weeks. The debris probably will not be stored in any landfill that's near here. It's probably going to be taken to landfills near and far. In that process, we are making sure that homeowners are only sifting through this in a very minor way. We're not having to move large items because there's dangerous situations and things that can happen, and also that there's chemicals and things like that this needs to be assessed. It's going to take a long time. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Part of that marathon will include insurance claims for lost homes and belongings. Experts say it's too early to predict the full cost, but expect it to be huge.
I can't imagine the bill won't be $1 billion. We've had insured component of the loss in California wildfires of that magnitude before, and this is as bad as I've seen.
It's not just homeowners assessing the damage of the fire. Businesses are counting the cost as well. More than 20 million people visit California's wine regions every year. The industry is worth more than $60 billion to California's economy. The Paradise Ridge Winery was one of the most popular in the area, but it was in the path of the fire and the buildings have been flattened. Manager Renee Bick has agreed to show us what's left to see.
You know, we did wine and cheese pairings out here, enjoying the view. We had offices here.
The tasting room has been reduced to ash and the winery is gone.
This is definitely a blow to the community, blow to the neighborhood, blow to Sonoma County.
It's been 2 weeks since the fire struck and Renee is still processing how to deal with the damage.
It's pretty sad, but you know, the fire burned the building, the wine's gone, and now the plan is to rebuild. But initially it was shock and I guess some sadness. I don't know. I could still be in shock. Who knows? I get emotional every once in a while.
Renee says wine production will continue at other sites, and another tasting room at a different location remains open. The fire has been cruel, but Renee says it could have been worse.
Our family's chosen an optimistic approach of like, we get to rebuild, we get to make it better. We lost wine, you know, there's people who lost their homes, their lives, everything that they know is, you know, all their personal belongings, and those people have suffered a lot, and that's our community. That's the neighborhood that the winery's in. It's pretty much 99% gone, so that there's going to be a lot of rebuilding, and you know, but for us there's a lot of hope. The vineyards survived, a couple buildings survived.
If you look across the valleys here in Northern California, most of them are covered in vineyards like this one, and it gives you an idea of just how important the wine industry is to the local economy here. Now, thankfully, most of the wineries and vineyards were unaffected by the wildfires like this one, where the vines are still pretty much intact, and there's not many grapes around because most of this year's crop had already been harvested. Wine groups in the area say damage to wineries and vineyards has not been widespread. Even businesses who escaped the worst of the fires, like Rombauer Wines, say they felt an impact, but they remain optimistic about the future.
We won't forget the fires and the problems and challenges that it created. In our sense, and I think as an industry as a whole, our biggest challenge is to make sure that our consumer population around the world understands that the vineyards were a natural fire break. So the vineyards themselves, by and large, weren't affected. And as long as the wineries weren't caught up in the fire, then they're business as usual. So Napa Valley is still in very, very good shape. Yes, some of the wildlands around us were charred, but that's not a bad thing. It'll be okay.
The California wildfires of 2017 were the most deadly and destructive in the state's history. It will take years for communities to fully recover. The next wildfire season will bring a new set of challenges, and there are worries about the long-term future. Scientists say the impact of climate change will lead to more extreme weather conditions around the world. In California, that could lead to drier summers and more drought.
All of the projections I have seen would indicate that over much of California we would experience weather with some frequency that would be problematic for firefighting. temperatures would be higher. The pattern of precipitation would be different over the year.
The challenge for lawmakers in California is to decide how the state should adapt and try and tackle the effects of climate change. If they get it wrong, wildfires could become more common and even more devastating in the future. For the people living in Northern California, the record-breaking wildfires of 2017 will leave scars in the landscape and in their memories that will take a long time to heal.